bottom 20 acres of Burgess were actually planted by my great-grandfather. That was part of the old Pestoni winery.
I'm here at Pestoni Family Estate in Napa Valley, and I'm here with Greg Pestoni. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm good. It's a real pleasure to meet you. I do not believe we have met in the past.
We have not.
No, shame on me, because you're right here, right on 29.
Right on 29.
Yeah.
Right in the Rutherford Strip.
Yeah, and not a bad place to be. Just for our viewers and listeners to know, actually mostly for our viewers, Greg obviously has some scaffolding behind him. That is not part of your normal motif, I imagine. So you're redoing the tasting room here? And
yeah, we built this tasting room in '95. It was kind of the old stand-up tasting room where you stand up at the bar, and everything now is moved to more of a sit-down parlor style, and so we're kind of flipping it that way. We have Aaron Martin, who's a local designer, putting it together for us, so we're in the middle of it.
You got some wild history, and I want to get to that in just a minute, but let's just talk about right now. Again, as you said, we're in Rutherford, right on 29. About how many cases are you making, just a little homework here?
We're doing about 3,000.
Okay, so it's a nice small size, real comfortable.
It's a comfortable size. All of our stuff is estate. Sauvignon Blanc is, our big white, which we grow on, our property right behind us here. And then we have Sangiovese out front, and then we have some vineyards throughout the valley.
About how many acres are you farming?
We peaked out at 56. We're probably down to about 40 now.
That's still a fair amount of acreage to farm.
We sell a lot of bulk, too.
Your history, again, is just crazy. A classic Italian family coming to, Swiss Italian,
Swiss Italian, yep.
Coming to Napa Valley for a new world, a new place to be. Can we go back and talk about, why did they come here? Was it to come for the so-called American dream? I mean...
Yeah, I would think so. It's also probably to escape a Swiss nightmare. There was, at the time, in the 1880s, the Swiss got kind of kicked out of working in Italy. Stuff had gone on there, and I think that they basically said time for the Swiss to go home, and that was the only place the young men could go to make money. So my grandfather was the number 2 son who doesn't get anything. So he accompanied his sister and her child to America, where the husband had set up shop. And since he was, the number 2 son, he came here, left the older brother back with the goat and the rock shack, and they're still there. And we came over here and, of course, started the American dream.
Nice, very nice.
And it was very much of like a, do-it-yourself thing. A lot of the Swiss story was they worked for 10 years, saved up enough money, and went off on their own sort of thing. And a lot of Napa, that first generation of Italian names you see, Niccolini, Ragucci, Pestoni, Morsoli, who are our cousins twice over since the 1500s, were all Swiss Italian and from sort of the same village that we came from.
Why did they come to Napa? What was the deal?
Well, we heard that there was I don't know if you know the Salmina family.
I do not.
And in town, the Salminas had the William Tell Hotel, which was a Swiss hotel. They were all Swiss. And that was where all the Swiss Italians would gather to learn the messages from home. What I've noticed about our relatives is as soon as they got over here, being like the Italian part of them, they wanted to show off. So they sent photographs of themselves, all dressed, taken in St. Helena at the photo shop, in suits. They sent pictures of themselves in front of the winery they built. They sent pictures of the vineyards that they owned. And of course, every young kid in Switzerland saw those and said, oh my God, there's vineyards from Napa to the coast. And so they all came here. They went to Salinas, Sonoma. And so if you were Swiss, there's a couple things you knew how to do. You knew how to do the vineyards on the rocky hillside. You also knew dairy. And so Stornetta Dairy, which is in Sonoma, all those families, those are all Swiss. So you ended up doing dairy work or you did vineyard work.
So how many generations are you down?
Well, I'm number 4. My kids and my brothers and sisters' kids, everybody are on number 5.
How old are your kids?
Well, my son, I got started late. I was in the film business. I lived in LA. I didn't jumped the gun. So he's only 8. But my sister's kids, my sister is younger than me, they're 30 years old, 32, I think also.
Are they part of the winery as well?
They are Abreu family, David Abreu is their father, and he's a big vineyard manager. That was my sister's husband. And so they are in the business as well. One of them's a race car driver, though, does in the Midwest. But Matteo is kind of running the ship. And his daughter Lucia is working with the design team that's doing our interior here, working their way into this side. And, of course, Matteo is doing his dad's thing.
But you were in the film business. You didn't come into the wine business.
No. The wine business, when I was a teenager, wasn't as exciting as it had become. And so I grew up with Francis Coppola's son, Roman. And so from when I was in the 7th grade, another friend of ours lived in town and had cable. And Francis would send I should say, you didn't get TV down here on this side of town. There's no cable. So, yeah, the days before DirecTV and streaming. So Francis sent a Betamax, which was a brand new thing. It was like 1978, to our friend's house up in town, and with a TV guide marked of the movies that he wanted taped. But the tapes that he was sending were the rough cuts of Apocalypse Now.
Oh, no.
Like years before it came on. So, of course, we watched and memorized the movie two and a half years before it came out. So
what a thrill.
So yeah, and so getting in and going over, they did some reshoots here at the barn, part of the jungle setup and stuff. So you kind of got bit by the movie bug and the excitement of the magic of that. And so I ended up, Roman and I remained good friends, and I moved with him to New York, and we were at NYU Film School together. And then I went to work for his dad and him in San Francisco I was probably in the film business from 1987 till 2014.
Was that for Zoetrope then?
I was with Zoetrope, and then I'd written some scripts. I sold some to Disney. I sold some to. I worked with Mike Judge. I don't know if anyone. The Jackass guys was the last project I did. I had worked for Paramount and a few other and Spike Jonze. So I'd written 2 scripts for him. He was part of our, we hung out when we were in LA. Yeah. But, I returned here back in 2014.
Was it because of wine?
I think it was because of wine. Also, when we started this winery, I should roll back just a little bit. We stopped making wine at the original winery that my grandfather built during Prohibition.
And was that by Howell Mountain?
Where it was, do you know where Burgess Cellars is?
I do.
Okay. Below Burgess, the bottom 20 acres of Burgess were actually planted by my great-grandfather. That was part of the old Pestoni winery. If you go down to right where that hillside hits the bottom, you get the Bell Canyon Reservoir. Mm-hmm. Our winery ended up on the Bell Canyon Reservoir shores. The police used it as part of their shooting range.
And there's a police station there, isn't there, or something?
There's a shooting range.
Yeah, okay.
And that was at our winery. There was an old ghost winery that my grandfather built. And so after Prohibition, we sold that property, and then in the 50s, the people who bought it, the property was split. And Lee Stewart, who was putting together Souverain, which became the same site as Burgess, they bought the 20 acres of vineyard that were on the hillside. The city bought the 5 acres on the floor where the winery was, and then that became part of the reservoir. The Rossini property, which I don't know if you know Paula Cornell.
I'm going to see her today.
Okay, she is part of the Rossini family. The daughter that my great-grandfather was escorting over became her great-grandmother. Oh, funny. So they're all from the same town, Monte Carrasso.
This whole big connection.
It's a big connection.
Yeah.
So their property, their vineyard, was part of the underwater part of the reservoir. And so we left out there. We came down here onto Whitehall Lane in 1923. My grandfather planted it, and they tried to farm it. This is a heavier soil, and, it wasn't the perfect land for red grapes is what they grew. So the grapes came out, and much later, in the 70s or 80s, we learned how to put in drain tiles and, make the land work, and it is really great for Sauvignon Blanc. I should point out that right above us on the where the Pestoni winery was, if you know where the hairpin turn is going to Angwin, Viader Winery, that property was my grandma's property. So they were the Domingoses. They owned that property. They still own the 120 acres in between, and they owned the top, which is now Arkenstone. There was a divorce, and they had to sell off the Arkenstone piece. And then, my cousin, who still lives on the center piece, he curses his parents for selling the lower one where Viader was. There's a spring there, and that's how you used to actually enter and go up to the property. And they were that's the Domingos. They were the Portuguese side, and they've been up there since 1879. Now, the son, Louis, owned what is now Beatty Ranch, the Howell Mountain Vineyards up on top on Keys.
Yes.
The other son, my uncle Fred, bought Eller's Winery and bootlegged out of there. I've got his old bootlegger safe here from 1920 until 1959, when the county told him he had to pave the inside or pour cement inside his cellar, and he's like, "There's no money in this." And he shut down, and they shut down the then it was called Bale Mill Winery, but it was in the old Eller's building, and he lived in the house. And so he'd been on that property till he passed away in '79. And that's where my grandfather, when he grew the grapes down here, they would take the grapes up there to be crushed. But mostly my grandpa down here was doing brandy. He was doing bootleg brandy. And he used to supply the Napa County Courthouse, and he got tipped off when the raids were coming. And, of course, the famous story is, the best brandy he ever made, he had to dump down the river because they were about to be raided, and they never raided the place. The Domingos weren't, they didn't have any men that continued on the name, so their name's not really here anymore. They were, like I said, Portuguese. So we did a red wine, and we named it Domingos Brothers to try to, I have some of my Uncle Fred's old labels. It's 1 gallon of Napa Gamay, 1 gallon Sauterne, but he called it, it has Old Bale Mill wine, the Bale Mill on the cover of the label. And, it's kind of done in a deco style. And
for people who would like to visit here, Pestoni, can you, obviously right now, again, you're in the process of remodeling. Can they walk in? Do they need to make an appointment? How does that work?
We don't. Our permit allows us to we're open from 10 o'clock till 4:30. Obviously, it's nice to have an appointment. I think that was great when that came about, because it lets you know what's coming for the day. Right. And if you want a table, we have picnic tables out there. A lot of time people bring their lunches, and they'll do a tasting and then enjoy the day out on our lawn. We built a pavilion outside. It has heaters, so you can do outdoor tastings during, especially as we're under construction here. But this should be wrapped up in April, and you can come inside as well.
For our listeners who'd like to learn about you as well as Pestoni Family Vineyards, what is your website?
Our website is pestonifamily.com.
Greg, this was a lot of fun talking to you. I want to come back again and get some more stories out of you, but I appreciate your time.
Okay, great.
Great.
Thank you.